So in this problem, we have three lines. We have line L that has this equation, 2x plus 3y equals 18. So I'm going to first write it out as they write it in standard form, 2x plus 3y equals 18. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this in slope-intercept form. So first I subtract the 2x over, so we have 3y equals negative 2x plus 18. And then I'm going to divide by 3. So y equals negative 2/3 x plus, and then 18 over 3, that's going to be 6. All right, now the key thing here is that they tell us that lines L and N are parallel. Now that means if they're parallel, that means they have the same slope. And line M and line L are perpendicular. That means they have opposite reciprocals. That means if we take the two slopes and multiply them, we get negative 1. So this is key right here, that the slope is negative 2/3. That's key. So let's look at line M. They tell us that we have 6x plus ky equals 28. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to solve this for y to get the slope. So we have ky equals negative 6x plus 28. Then we divide both sides by k. So y equals negative 6 over k, x plus 28 over k. Now what do we know? Well, these two are perpendicular. So that means the slope has to be 3/2. We know it's 3/2 because, well, if we multiplied negative 2/3 and 3/2, we would get negative 6 over 6, which is just 1. These are opposite reciprocals. Opposite because one's positive, one's negative. Reciprocals because the numerator and the denominator trade places. So that means that this expression, negative 6 over k, has to equal 3/2. So what we have is we have two fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply. So 3k equals negative 12. So k equals negative 4. So that means that now I can put negative 4 back into this equation. So y equals negative 6 over negative 4x plus 28 over negative 4. And we can simplify that to 3/2 x minus 7. Now, let's look at line N. We're going to do the same thing. For line N, we're going to say, all right, well, the equation is 6x plus wy equals 15. So we'll subtract 6x first. So wy equals negative 6x plus 15. And then we divide by w. So y equals negative 6 over wx plus 15 over w. Now we know that lines L and N are parallel. So that means we know the slope has to be the same as line L, negative 2/3. So negative 2/3 equals negative 6 over w. So when we cross multiply, we get negative 2w equals negative 18. And so then we get w equal to 9. So now, anywhere there's a w, I can replace it with 9. So we have y equals negative 6 over 9x plus 15 over 9. Now this will simplify to negative 2/3 x. And let's see, 15 over 9, we can take a 5 out of that. No, a 3, leaving a 5 and a 3. All right. Now we've got the three equations. Now what we have to do is we have to say, well, wait a minute. Lines L and M intersect at a point. So we need to know, where do these two lines intersect? So to do that, what we do is we set these two equations equal to each other. We say negative 2/3 x plus 6, that's going to equal 3/2 x minus 7. Now what I'm going to do is, I don't like fractions in my equations, so I'm just going to multiply this whole thing by 6. Why? Because that number will get rid of this denominator and it will get rid of this denominator. So when we do that, we're going to have negative 4x plus 36 equals 6 divided by 2 is 3 times 3 is 9, x minus 42. So now I have one equation with one variable. So I need to just get x by itself. So if I add 4x over, I get 36 equals 13x minus 42. If I add 42 over to the other side, I get 78 equals 13x. And if I divide by 13, we actually get a nice number. We get x equal to 6. So now what we do is we need to figure out what's the y value that goes with that. So I'll pick an equation, and I can pick either side. So I'll just say 3/2, and instead of x, I put 6 minus 7. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, times 3 is 9, minus 2. That's going to give me my y value of 2. So that means these two intersect at 6, 2. So now I'm going to save that because I'm going to need that in a second. But I need to do the same work over here. I need to set these two equations equal to each other. So we set 3/2 x minus 7 equal to negative 2/3 x plus 5/3. So now, same thing, we're going to multiply this equation by 6. And so when we do that, we're going to get 9x minus 42 equals negative 4x plus 10. So I move the x over, so we have 13x minus 42 equals 10. Add the 42 over, so 13x equals 52, so x equals 4. So then I'll plug 4 in for x anywhere I see it. So y equals 3/2 times 4 minus 7. All right. And so that means we get 6 minus 7, which is negative 1. So these are our two coordinates. We've got 6, negative 1, and we've got, whoops, sorry, that should be a 4. 4, negative 1, and 6, 2. Now the final question is, what is the distance between these two lines, 2 points? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot these 2 points. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So point P is where L and M, that's this guy right here, this is point P. So that's right there, that's point P. Point Q is this one right here, that's 4, negative 1, right there. So how do we find the distance between them? Well, what we do is we make a triangle, a right triangle. And so this point right here, Q, is at 4, negative 1. Point P is at 6, 2. And so this point right here, this is at, well, it just moves sideways, but doesn't go up and down, so it has the same y value. This one, this line moves up and down, but doesn't move side to side. So it has this value of 6. Now, that means from here to here is a distance of 2, because our y values don't change, but our x values differ by 2. Here, the x values don't change, but the y values, they differ by 3. And so what we have is we have a right triangle. And so to find the hypotenuse, we use what's called the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b are the legs, whereas c is what we call the hypotenuse, the long side. So we plug in 2 for A and 3 for B. And so we get 4 plus 9 equals c squared. So 13 equals c squared. So that means we take the square root of c and we get square root of 13, which is our answer, square root of 13. And we're done.